Please rise for silent invocation, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Let's play ball. Will the clerk call the roll?
Councilman Foley,
Here.
Councilman Grubbs,
Here.
Councilman Bastian,
Here.
Vice Mayor Stiltner,
Here.
Mayor Burnett.
Here. All are present. We have a full quorum. Welcome back, Reed. Glad to see you. I know that it was not the easiest for you to get back in time, but you had plenty of extra time in airports to read through all this, so we're glad that you're here.
I'm glad to be seen.
With that discussion item 4 is fiscal year 2024-2025 operating fund budgets, capital outlay, and capital improvement programs. Wayne, who do you have presenting on this?
I'm going to do the presentation tonight. We do have John and finance staff is here that worked on the budget, as well as all the department heads. So depending on the level of questions that you have, we can bring them up to answer those, but I'll do the overall from there. Let me get the
Go ahead and
PowerPoint
orchestrate
on
that.
TV. All right, so what I'm going to start with, the presentation's got basically 3 components. So the first one is just the background. When we sat down as a department, as staff, to put together the budget, these are the directions that we were providing to the departments as they put it together. The middle part is the details of the budget itself, and then we conclude with the setting the max millage item at the end. So starting off on that, these are the priorities we've talked about for years. They're sort of our strategic pillars we've used for a long time. The only thing that's different about this is I did add resilience as a standalone, because particularly since the 2 hurricanes, we've really made a priority of being sure that our community is stronger and easier, better suited to withstand, recover from, and minimize the impacts of natural disasters, but not just them as well, cyber attacks and other things. So there's a lot of emphasis in the budget on protecting this community and being prepared for whatever may come. The text in here, just there's a couple different ways to look at it. We did tell them there was no direction from council starting this year in the budget to reduce any service level. So it's designed as maintain all service levels and all functions that we have, and then in some areas improve the service level. So where we have infrastructure deficiencies, meaning either old and dated infrastructure needs to be upgraded, whether it's pipes, small pipes, older pipes, old lift stations, or areas that don't have stormwater, that were built prior to certain stormwater regulations. The other point we made was be aware that we're reaching build out here as a community, and we will not have the luxury of, say, like where Daytona Beach is now, where they've got a tremendous amount of new development revenue coming in. We're not going to have that, so we need to be building budgets looking over the next 5 to 10 years, expecting flattening revenue streams as we go forward. The bottom part of that slide gets at just a couple of the big things we also have to deal with. You've seen this before, the pattern of salaries and benefits and their percentage of the total cost. Every year we deal with the insurance cost and inflation cost. This year we're predicting an insurance renewal cost that goes up and down from year to year. We expect this to be a typical year, not overly high, not overly low. The inflation number we projected, which is way nicer than it had been the last couple years, where we were up as high as the 8, 9%. So that's come back down. And last fall we updated the fees for a number of our services, so that's provided a little bit more flexibility with revenue in those funds. Another way to look at it, and I just put this quote in here, it focuses on the budgets being driven by proactive maintenance of what we own, taking care of what we have. You've probably seen that in other communities. The last thing you want to be is one of those headline cities where you have major failures in infrastructure because you didn't address it until it actually became an emergency. And the same thing with the people. The 2 components I think that I told them is take care of our infrastructure, be sure that we're proactive. We do not want to defer maintenance on our infrastructure, and the people here are critical to us. The way everything gets done, we're a service-oriented organization. What gets done by the 500 people that work for the city of Port Orange. So actually, if you look at the culture over the last several years, and I've got this next slide gets into a lot of details of that. We have one of the strongest sets of employees we've had in all the time I've been around. So I started back in '07. We are now down to about 10 vacancies citywide, essentially 0 in the police department. We have people in training, so we have made a huge difference. We have employees who are geared to finding ways to do things better. I'll tell you, over the multiple years I've worked in government, there are places that have employees who will see something that doesn't work well, that's not functioning well, walk past it and go, can't wait to see that blow up in management's face. And that's a terrible thing to have. The employees of Port Orange walk past that and go, I know I can do this better. I'll go tell them I can do it better. And this is the list of things that they've done this year. I think one of the things when we were putting this together, because I wanted to make sure it was clear to everyone that our employees don't just sit here and go, it's time for the new budget. What do we do to pay for stuff with inflationary costs? Let's raise taxes. They are trying to find ways to lower costs, do more with less. We see this coming from council all the time, that you guys bring the same thing to the table. We don't expect you to just keep doing the same thing. We expect you to find improvements. Some of these are major cost savings. So the switch over to Tyler is about $300,000 a year cheaper than the prior software was. It's a more functional product more people have, so it fits our needs better. We just had the Daytona Beach Shores switch over to paying electronically. That's about $40,000 a year in savings and credit card fees that we were paying for them. One of the things that's in there with the utility department, so we spend a lot of money on materials, chemicals and things to treat our water and to treat our wastewater. And however much of that used, that's a lot of money to do. We in the past had a consultant on board, sort of an older computer product that helped mix these all together to get to the requirements so that we had the federal standard quality water. And we now have in-house people who are experts at putting this together. Think about them, they're like expert chefs. They can build the best model of water at the least amount of materials needed. So they are saving us hundreds of thousands of dollars a year in chemical cost to keep our water clean and safe. That is a lot. The price of the goods that they were putting in, that we pay for, have skyrocketed through inflation recently, and we haven't had to increase the cost because we're using so much less that we've been able to absorb the increases in cost without going up. That same group of people, we do in-house testing of our nutrient loads. That was something the state originally said, we don't let people do that. And our guys were so good and so persistent, they went out and said, why not? We think we can. That saves us close to 50 grand a year. There's a number of things in here. When we were up in Tallahassee earlier in the year, the governor's office asking for legislative appropriations, his budget staff just let us know legislative appropriations is probably not the future for getting a lot of money. We've done really well recently, but you saw this year a ton of things got vetoed throughout the region. The staff said, look, we have put money in multiple places out there that don't subject you to the state political process of going through the legislative appropriation budget vetoes. Go get the money where it is. And so our guys have gone out there and done master plans that make us grant eligible for all this money. So we've got the $15 million for the sewer plant upgrade already. We've got, I think it's $200,000 for a vulnerability assessment, which will make us eligible for all the sustainability dollars throughout. So having these things on board means we get to leverage our dollars throughout the state.
Well, let's face it too, the $15 million that we got for a utility system from the state, we wouldn't have gotten that money if we weren't very good at operating or how we take care of our water in the first place. Because the state doesn't like to reward failing. You know, they certainly like to see systems that work and work well. And I'm very proud that we have one of the best functioning water systems, if not the county, at very least the entire region.
And we have it because of the people that run it. It doesn't
Absolutely.
run itself.
Absolutely.
So those are the kind of people that come up with these ideas. So when we come in, and you've probably read to the end of the story already. So you know what we put in front of you is a budget based off of the same millage rate, 4,999, which provides about $2 million, a little over $2 million more dollars in general fund revenue. That's not because we didn't do anything to lower our cost. It's because the things we've put in there exceed that savings that they did. And I'll go through and explain how we got to that. But I just thought it was important. There's a number of things on here. One of the things we will do this year to do better is instead of putting them together for you at the budget, when these ideas come up, we'll bring them into an actual council meeting and let the department head present to you what we've done to do things better so that you'll be able to hear and see the improvements, because they're constantly out there coming up with these ideas. Some of you have heard me tell you, my regular meetings I have with the department heads, they come get me and take me to their places. So we go out to the sewer plant, we go to the fire training tower, we go out to our parks. I sat in on the police accreditation meetings. They bring me out to their places and show me what the ideas they have to do better. So I expect this to keep going.
Government has certain core competencies of the things that we do well, things like public safety, water, sewer, things like that. One of the natural core competencies of government is not necessarily communicating our message. And we've got people in place now that I think can do that effectively. And really, the more we tell people and inform people, and not just the simple things, certainly Port Orange University is a part of that, but just on a regular basis, being able to bring good news to council, because when you bring it to us, there are a lot of people that pay attention, and I really appreciate the emphasis on that moving forward.
The one thing I forgot, I didn't put the note clear enough, in addition to this, there are some things down here that didn't have necessarily monetary impacts, but they have respect and credibility impacts to show that you've got quality people here. One that's not on here, though, is because recently the tragedy at Sugar Mill Elementary, where we had the accident, the police officers, if you've been able to watch our police officers who serve in that area, work in the motor unit, and their efforts to find ways to make things safer between them and our public works staff, all the amount of time that's gone in. But I've sat in meetings and watched people who are enforcement based sit there with school people and use their experience in enforcement to tell them this is how to make your roads safer. And they really care. Like watching somebody, you go speeding, you're going to get in trouble. You probably won't see the nice version of that officer, but when it comes to how do you make the schools a safer place, they pay attention, and they have provided concrete ideas on how to do things better. So when we start moving forward with that, again, so most of it on here is monetary benefits, but there are a lot of things that they do to build credibility and respect in the community.
I think you just gave a preview of next month's council.
So this is the part of the presentation that's all about the numbers. The starting big picture, going through overall to funds, and then to the more traditional ways you look at it. The budget is put together at that millage rate's 169, about $170 million. The last year's budget was about 185, so it's actually $15 million lower as an overall budget. Some of that is due to we had capital dollars put in there that show up one time and then end up in the funds, but they don't show up each year. So we had put aside some money last year for City Hall. We have grant funds and other capital projects, so that's why the total is a little lower. You probably saw that the state a few years ago, there was a tremendous infusion of federal money at the state, and their state budget went up, but once the federal money went away, the budget dropped. And there was a lot of conversation about how they saved billions of dollars in the state budget, but what they really did is not have federal money added to their budget to spend. We kind of had something here, is the number is substantially lower than last year as a whole, principally because those were one-time funds that have now moved on. The general fund itself at 61, last year was about 58, so it's a little over 2.4 or so more. The operating millage rate for that's tonight proposed is 4.9999, and our GO bond millage rate is the 0.1720 associated with that. The bottom part of this just shows you some of the bigger components of it. The capital improvement program, $28 million worth of construction projects coming up in the upcoming year, about $6 million worth of outlay, which is mostly fleet and repairs and work on buildings. The $28 million, you'll see there's some of the enhancements are tied to the capital project process as we go forward. This breaks down the budget by fund. It's kind of more of a finance way to show things in funding cycles. If you want me to stop, I'll go over them, but I'll kind of move through the fund version and get to the more specifics. What the main thing on this one to see is that the enterprise funds are actually larger than the general fund when it comes to overall expenditures. This is detail of the funds, broken down by all the things that are underneath those larger categories and what the dollars are. These are, it's by fund, it's harder to explain the changes because their capital goes in 1 year, like water sewer, we had like 8 or 9 projects last year. This year we only have 4, so it's substantially down. One of the funds had major grant dollars in there, so it was up, now it's down. We had FEMA money go into one of the funds, so it's a thing that the finance staff, and John wants to give you the theory of fund accounting and all the funds you can, but it's not as easy to understand why these go because they're affected by so many different things. Here's the smaller version. This is the smaller ones that cost less than the big ones. They have CRAs, building departments fund is in here. Same thing as the others. The general fund's what most people spend a lot of time talking about. This is where we get our money from. So this breaks it down by the sources. There's nothing different here than you've seen. A lot of you are veteran council members, so you've probably seen this slide or something like it multiple times. The ratios are fairly similar here. The amount that's taxes compared to the intergovernmental transfers are actually fairly significant as the number 2 influx of where we get revenue at over 7 million. So you can see why that becomes so important. And as we struggle when we're trying to tell you exactly how much money we have, because the state's budget starts July 1 and they don't often finalize all these exact numbers to us. They don't really have to until some of them could be as late as August before we get them. Last year we were fortunate, we got most of them in mid-July, but a $200,000-300,000 hit there is a substantial impact to our operation. So, but it's important to know where the money comes from. And then I just took this and broke down the property tax, and this is where the tax money comes from as that bigger piece of that other pie. Again, this is the same thing that you've seen year after year. The dominant is residential. We have a fair balance with commercial because of the larger shopping centers that we have in the area. The 70% of our homes are homesteaded, so that we actually, there's a substantial reduction in the amount of total money we get off of that much residential because of the protections that are provided to our homeowners from taxes going up.
Wait, can I pause you for just 1 second? As far as the intergovernmental revenue funds, is there anything that we're still waiting on, or is all of that?
I don't think we have any of them yet. We're projecting, two.
So everything is projections based on.
And we're projecting flat. So
I'm sorry?
We're projecting fairly flat.
Projecting flat, but we don't have the definitive numbers. Do you remember about how long ago, what it seemed like it took a while last year too?
Mid-August.
Yeah, mid-August. So we won't see those numbers definitively for a while?
And it's hard to tell you with the state.
Yeah, okay. Okay.
This is how we spend the money in the general fund, looking at it by operating, not by department, but by what it's spent on the stuff. So people, similar to the other one, same ratios you've seen in prior years. The transfers, we try to put some examples on the chart there so you can see examples of where general fund money is transferred to. But generally, again, the same ratios that you've seen in the past. Here's the department version. This is the one most people look at. Our big expenditures in public safety have always been in that area of close to 50%. Then you've got your public works and parks that are the other large one, and then all the rest of the departments are fairly small. What we did here this year, they were all told, as we talked about earlier, to be a carry forward budget. 0 to 3% was allowed for inflationary impacts to gas prices and the various items that they have in their operating budget. And so that's the ratios are the same. They're slightly higher numbers, and I'll get to where the specifics, where the $2 million from the extra revenue that comes from using the existing millage rate. The enterprise funds here, again, similar breakdown, utilities being the biggest. The special revenue funds are smaller, but similar revenues there. Grant money, we put examples down there to see where we get our grant money from. We do pretty well with the statewide money for transportation projects, so that actually ends up being a pretty good revenue source for us. And then moving on to the capital improvement. So we did this back at the beginning of June and went through it in detail. These are the two big expenditures in there, $28 million of construction projects, and then the outlay for the other pieces of equipment. I put a summary sheet here of the notable projects. We have the PowerPoint if you want to get into that. If we end up in too much of a debate on the millage rate, there's about $5.5 million of these projects are general fund, and you have about $3 million of the outlay that's general fund. So when you're looking at the major components outside of our people, you got about over $8 million of this stuff that we spend general fund dollars on. There's some pretty important and notable projects in there, including building the improvements to the Cambridge Canal. A lot of these we went through so that you can see the resilience focus, the utility upgrade focus, the parks focus in there. Even with a parks bond out there, we have always committed to and spent money maintaining our parks and upgrading them along the way. The bond ends up being building more capacity, but we do take care of our parks, and you see these kind of things every year. I put the bottom part in there as prior year funding, because a lot of times people forget, like, well, what about this project? What happened to it? But it was funded in a prior year, but this year you'll see activity on it. So that's what those are. I think there'll probably be some discussion about the City Hall elevator, because that came up that night. So just to give you a brief on that, because we had budgeted about $400,000 for that project based off of preliminary conversations and discussions. We hadn't reached the point of contracts or detail. And as it came up, there was some pretty good concern amongst the council members. Do we really want to put that kind of money into an elevator when whatever happens with City Hall, if it's going to be some form of a major renovation, those elevators are not going to stay. They're old technology, old hydraulics. So as we started pushing back on the elevator conversation and trying to get a good price, council, I think the majority of the council members said we're not paying $400,000 to fix 2 elevators for 3 years. So we were trying to find a way to logistically have an elevator functioning at all times. So because there's no way to get upstairs ADA compliant. There's stairs. If you're mobility impaired, you can't get there. We have employees who would have to move back downstairs, and we have customers we'd have to serve. We'd have to kind of rework the building. So as we started talking about it, the public works staff and Robin spent some time with the elevator people, and through good hard work on their part, they were able to get us a price estimate to do both elevators for $190. So if we push down that and do that, that means we don't have to worry about the lack of it, and then the extra money that was in the budget can go back into the fund balance, and you might be able to, you can either reallocate it or you can use it to do something with your millage if you'd like to. But based on that conversation, we had not reached the point of actually pushing hard to get a contract. It's not like they were going to pay $400,000. That was a budget estimate from conversations. But once we told them we don't need an elevator to be 25 years, we need an elevator to be 3, then that helped build it. So that's just letting you know. I don't want to, these other projects are far more substantial and significant to the community, but that one has a change from when we talked about it in June.
Good change.
These are the service enhancements for employees and a couple of extra funding expenses. The 2 community service officers were talked about. These are the civilian police department employees that will direct traffic at the 2 elementary schools where we have the greatest congestion, and so those are their general fund. The 2 management level positions, I would say, so the EMS division chief was an existing position. The fire department had that in the past. It went away with budget cuts in prior years. We have reached a point with having an ambulance now, though, that the chain of command, the span of control, it's a very complex job. We are part of the county system, so there's a lot of requirements to remain compliant with them. They control the doctors, they control the paperwork, the data. It is the vast majority of what we do are medical calls. Our ambulance, our transport, has the most calls for service of any municipal transport in the entire county. So it is the busiest transport in the county, municipal, not all the county ones, but against all the cities that have them. And it also, this person would be responsible for all the training, all the handling of the quartermaster, what medicine do we have on the ambulance, what equipment do we have on the ambulance. It's reached a point where running it with the chief and a couple of other people is probably not the most efficient way, and certain things may suffer. They currently, we end up making about $1 million in revenue off running the transport. We have been spending a little around the $800,000 mark. In the past couple years, we've done one-off expenditures like buying a second set of bunker gear. So it wasn't like we were spending that as ongoing. So what they've requested to do this year is fill this position permanently, and it'll still be the same expense that we're spending on the ambulance. It'll still be about $850,000, but it'll be, instead of it being a one-off purchase, it'll be an ongoing cost of a personnel move, but it would be funded by that revenue that last year we bought bunker gear. I think we put some money into the pension out of it one year too. So instead of going with one-off purchases for that extra money, it would be ongoing personnel. The engineering position, so you saw we do $28 million of capital projects. We had a little lull during COVID where we dropped down to doing fewer, but we typically do somewhere between 23, 24, $30 million of capital. Port Orange had a history of sort of dispersing capital management to all the departments. And there were very hardworking, good people who tried their best to manage construction projects, but it's not what they do for a living. These departments don't. It was not the most effective way to run construction. When we created the engineering division, we consolidated most of the capital under engineering. So there are a ton of projects that engineering is managing right now. And one of the things I've been fortunate to do most of my career is supervise some form of capital project. And if you get $10 million worth of a building you're building, or an $8 million pipe, the money that you can save or the money you lose if you manage it incorrectly, where you get bids aren't right because you didn't put together the documents correctly, you get you get change orders, cost overruns, delays. We have had capital in the past, and you can see this. If you buy an air conditioner supposed to last 30 years, nobody knows how to take care of it because it wasn't done, scoped correctly. You have to replace the air conditioner in 20 years with a 30-year life. You have roofs designed for 30 years, you're replacing them in 20 years. The cost of having this person assist Juno, and those of you who worked with him, you've seen his work ethic, and he wouldn't ask for help if it wasn't something that wasn't critical for us to do. The amount of construction that we're running, you will save way more than $115,000 a year having somebody that's trained to manage these projects. The cost of mistakes in capital at the $28 million level is big, and having somebody that's qualified. So I'd support this and ask them to leave this in here, because I thought that was a fair cost. You can see it's split funded. It only hits the general fund to 10%. Most of what he's doing is water, sewer, and stormwater. So it's a minimal impact to the general fund, but it's a critical impact to our construction process as we go forward. And then the two at the bottom, we talked about this before. So in the past, we had not been able to execute well on sidewalk repairs and street sweeping. The new leadership team came in and immediately brought us higher quality people to work with. And we took our budget, which has always been tied to just what the gas tax gives us. And so we've never subsidized that with any Port Orange money. We spent all of that money in less than 6 months this year. So you guys were good and gave us a little extra to keep going. So what we've put in this budget is another $350,000. So it's, the reason I put the arrows is that's $200,000 more than what was in there last year, and $150,000 more that was in there last year for those two. So this is the bulk, these last two slides, of the difference in the budget when it comes to actual things. So some of them are under the enterprises, so you don't see them in the $2 million, a little over $2 million in the general fund going up to the current millage. But some of them you can see where the general fund is. So it's your capital projects, that $5.3 of capital, the $3 million of outlay, and then these positions here. That's what you get for the extra $2 million in the general fund. So as we start talking about it, if you have questions, I just want to make sure that you knew what we were doing and requesting.
So that's supposed to be street sweeping, not street repaving?
It is street repaving. It is repaving.
Oh,
the
it's
street.
repaving, okay.
Yeah. So we did 5 miles this year alone. Hadn't done any in like 18 months prior to that. And so this will help us finish off the major streets. And before it appeared to be a major community concern. So those were the two that we elected to recommend to you that you put more in. The almost done with the talking before we get to the millage. We're required to show you the debt. So the top one is existing debt. I don't know if we've given it to you this well before, but it's really well put together because it shows what we owe, how much we pay, and what year it's going to be paid off. So you see Eastport's almost done. We got about three of the utility ones there that are getting close to being retired. And then the bottom is new debt. These are replacement pieces of equipment we talked about back in June being bought with the debt model, so it ends up being cheaper to the city to purchase them that way. So you see what you're doing moving forward in your debt model.
Wayne, when you retire debt from CRAs like Eastport, does that free up dollars that can be used for infrastructure in that area so that you don't have to go to the general fund for those kinds of
That's
dollars?
correct. For Eastport is now already making more money than we have to pay off on the debt. So there's already a little pile being built. So anytime there's a CIP project or anything we want to do in the Eastport CRA, we now have CRA dollars to use. We don't have to use, and it will have more going forward.
So, for example, like sidewalk repair done in that area could be used with those funds?
Correct.
All right.
And then if we sell the Riverwalk property, we'll pay off that debt. Then you'll have some money to do stuff in Riverwalk as well. That's what CRAs are supposed to be for. They weren't supposed to be debt retirement as much as they are to generate. We're getting there.
We've been saddled with that debt for a couple of decades now, so that's good news.
I don't have a lot of detail on this, but I thought it was important to at least say in upcoming years, because some of you will be around for this. These are not in this year's budget, but it's when we told them, what are you thinking about 5, 10, 15 years out? And what are you thinking about next year? There's more commitment to public safety. The Parks Bond project, the bond gets approved in a month. We'll be looking at these projects showing up in CIP, what we do at City Hall, and then we got to finish the upgrade of the wastewater treatment plant going forward. So there's no detail to these. It's just a look ahead to be aware that if you're sitting here next year at this time, you'll probably see some of those.
Now, Wayne, it's school resource officer versus what you talked about just a minute ago with community service officers. Can you explain if those are different?
So the community service officers are civilian police employees that direct traffic. The school resource officer is an actual officer that would be assigned to the school. They have asked us for help in the middle schools particularly to assist in that, and we've seen some value in it. So Mandy and I still have to work out the details of what and how to do it, but we believe it's valuable enough to have considered in the next year upcoming budget.
I just want to make sure there's a clarification between what those two things are.
Yes, thank you. So on to the max millage. This is we do this pie every year based off the typical house, and the wedge that's the cities. We're about 28% of your residents get the letter. Here's your tax bill. We're about 28% of that bill going forward. We'd be the same with this millage rate this year. This is us compared to everybody. This is last year's millage because we have not heard what every city's doing. About 4 or 5 have reported. I have a meeting with all the city managers tomorrow. We may get a little bit more information. Of the ones that I've heard from, they're all either staying the same. Deltona is proposing to go up. DeBerry's proposing to go to rollback. Everybody else is staying at the millage that they're at. So it looks like we'll end up staying in the same position on the totem pole. It looks, for our standpoint, we provide a really good value to our residents to live here. We have consistently been in the least millage rates in the county, and we provide very high level service. It's a challenge. It's an extreme challenge. Rarely does being the cheapest equate to being the best. If you're buying electronics, cars, food, you usually don't think by paying less you're going to get better, but Port Orange, we have figured out ways to get there. It's harder to do. That whole list of improvements that you've seen and the help that you guys have brought to us with your suggestions on how to be better has been how we've been able to do this. But without the people doing it, it's hard to be that low on the millage rate and provide the service we do, and yet we still do. I think that our residents, this is a great city. I can't find any major flaws with it. I think we really have done a good job as an organization providing that service to our people.
Well, I think we also need to remember that whenever we do this, we owe our businesses a great debt of gratitude, because most of our residents who've been here a while understand that through their homestead exemption, they're capped. Their increase is only going to go up so much because of that Save Our Homes exemption. Our businesses don't have such a cap, so they take it on the chin and they continue to invest in us. So it's good to have that balance between residents and businesses, not just so that the businesses serve our residents, but when it comes to the tax bill, we have that balanced approach, and that does help keep us on the low end of the millage rate. So whatever we do, knowing that our residents have that cap to protect them, at the end of the day, we need to thank our businesses, particularly our small businesses who have to figure it out.
This is what we put in the PowerPoint you got. We built one that's got more depth. That was by 0.05. This is by 0.025. So it gives you a little bit more choice as you go through it. So if it's okay with you, I'll leave this one here as you discuss, and John, I, and all the staff are here to answer any questions you have on any part of this or anything as you go forward with the millage item.
Why don't you, I'll tell you what, we're going to certainly, let's do this, let's work this way and then work this way. Questions of staff and comments on where we are, millage rate and the like. I'd kind of like to, first of all, get all the questions of staff out there, but as we go, please, I want us all to comment on what our opinion is on what we should be doing with our millage rates as we go, so that all of us can absorb that as we go. Scott, why don't you open up?
Okay, thank you. Wayne, just as a matter note that I think would be helpful as we move through the budget process, at the beginning of the presentation, a lot lot of the pages here, like, I'm just trying to give you an example, page 9, 10, stuff like that. If we can always see a comparative to the previous year and have that number, so we can try to, you know, especially once we get the budget books, those things are very thick, but it would be helpful, I think, for us to see, okay, in this particular line, so to speak, this was what it was for 2023 or 2024 and so forth and going forward. So just a notation on that. If we can, as we do that, that'll be helpful for all of us, I think. And let me go back to the page.
Like if I'm
Where we're at.
spending police, I'm spending 6.3 million in this budget, and last year we spent 15.8, and I know most of that is personnel. But as a point of comparison, line by line, I tend to agree with
I think
that.
it's just helpful for us to try to see that. So what was our carryover from last year's budget at the end? What did we carry over to reserve funds?
John will answer those.
Okay.
I'd have to go get the act for to actually tell you what it was.
I'd like that.
24.
I have other questions to ask
We'll,
if you.
yeah, we'll be here, there's
Yeah,
5
we'll
of
be
us.
here. So with that, I guess what I'm asking, the next question is going to be, where are we currently with this budget, and what do we see anticipation by the end of the year? And I know that there's a lot of variables there. We got a long way to go to get to the end of the year, but I'd kind of like to see where that's at, and then also get an update on where are we with our total reserve funds at this moment in time. I know we, as a policy, we more than exceed the GFOA recommendations on those, but I think that, you know, year by year, that as we go through the budget process, it's important for us to know where we're at and then be able to make decisions as to whether or not we want to be more aggressive in utilizing some of that to get some things off of our plate, especially with capital, you know, capital improvement stuff that's one-time expenditures and things like that. So that's kind of what I was looking for from John to be able to have as we go through some of this
He has an estimate of the carry forward because we'd have to have it to get the total budget.
for this year.
For this year.
Yeah. Do we?
And you know, I don't know if you know off the top of your head, when he comes back, we'll,
Well, let's wait. We'll wait. Maybe you want to go to somebody else, Mayor, for right now?
Drew?
Well, I want to hear some of those other figures too, so.
Yeah.
Like, but I appreciate the presentation as it is designed, and, you know, looking at the added millage rate scenarios helps. So clearly, what are we at? The current millage rate is 2 million over, but in a $169 million budget, I mean, that's pretty much the cost of the inflation or the CPI, right? Or probably it's a little less than that.
the percent's like 8, and we were about 3.5 or so on inflation.
Okay, so, yeah, so,
From general fund, I mean, that's 8% of the general fund. It's a much lower number off the full city budget.
yeah,
You're
but-
right, it's much closer to total.
so that would
Also
kind of
kind
cover.
of keep in mind, when it comes to salaries, we're playing catch-up, so
Oh,
I'm
aware.
So if the salary increases seem to be higher than CPI now,
yeah.
that's just because we're playing catch-up, trying to take care of our
Yeah.
employees.
And we have another round coming,
Yes, absolutely.
so, okay,
You good for the moment?
yes.
Okay. Tracy, what you got?
Waiting for John's answers so then I can expand upon those off of what Scott asked.
Okay. I will, just throw this out there
here's the
too,
other.
when we're talking about fund balance carryover, when we are in a good position with reserves, we can take a look at allocation of some of that, if that has not been done already. But I would prefer we take a look at those things for one-time capital, because if you start allocating those kind of things for recurring expenses, you can get in trouble really, really fast.
I think that's what you were getting at, is maybe pick off a couple of
Yeah,
capital projects.
maybe we
through-
could go back to that slide when John comes back, because I think that's probably a discussion that all of us want to have, is let's look at that to see, do we have some stuff in our reserve funds that we
talking-
can check off and start immediately moving these numbers back?
We want to
down?
spend more on paving. We want to
We're gonna
spend
spend it no
more.
matter what,
Yeah,
yeah.
we want to spend more on paving because
Gotta
we're
get
playing
done.
catch-up.
Right.
We want to spend more on sidewalks because we're still paying catch-up. But maybe this is some potential. Reed?
Wayne, as far as Tyler goes, are we fully implemented into that now, or where are we in that process?
We're HR, finance are active and live. We've still got to do utility billing. I think there's a couple of other elements out there. The majority of the day-to-day operations, so the financial operations are in there as well as all of our HR.
Do we know
but we-
when it will be complete? So
Next
that-
year is January.
So we really won't. So we really won't see those savings entirely.
Well, we will because it's the work, we're not paying Workday, we're paying Tyler. So at the end of, I think we've made the last Workday payment.
All right. So,
And
so
so
those
It
savings.
was,
are
it
in
was a
this
difference,
budget.
yeah.
Okay.
He gave me a chart that has the differences in the funds. The reason that we didn't put funds in there, because like I was telling you, there's a couple of them, like one of them is 70% difference because we had FEMA payments. So the one that was other required funds is 70% lower because of our FEMA payments are gone. So when you start looking at year to year, typically what council's asked for is show me the departments and how do the departments change, but not so much when they're clustered together by fund, because you have these huge swings and you spend a lot of time talking about why is that 78% lower? One of them 78% higher because we got a bunch of grant money that we put in there, so we get all the money that we got from the state. And so you see these extreme swings that are fund-based, but typically councils want to know, is the police department 200,000 more than it was last year, or 100,000? That's where we normally see them. In that list, none of them were more than 3% higher than they were last year, because that was the cap we put on them. So some of them are zero, some of them flattened out, but they're somewhere between 0 and 3% of what they were last year by department, because we stopped that. The increases, that's why we're showing you the CIP, the capital is where you saw the larger changes in projects. We're going back to Vice Mayor's comments on, you don't have to pay for that out of general fund. You have reserves. If you feel comfortable at that level, you could offset the one-time cost for capital out of reserves if you would like to do something like that.
I also know that our tax levy, we generally reflect that at 95% of projections, and that is to be conservative. I know at times, just about every year I've seen that that'll come in, I think last year was 96.4, so I mean, there is some room. And I understand I could take 96.4% of this number, but I also know that this number is not firm numbers until we have them in August. So when we set the max millage rate, just like in every year we've done in years past, we're saying this is the most that will go, but we're not done. We're going to be sharpening our pencils. We're going to be looking for ways to, because if we end up at the end of the day exactly where we are today at the max millage rate, we haven't tried. John, what you got for us?
Yes, sir. As reported by our auditors, as part of the audit, our total assigned and unassigned fund balance at 9/30/23 was $24.2 million. That's a little under 39% of the.
What is that number again?
$24.2 million. So that's just a hair under 39%.
And that's as of?
9/30/23.
So that doesn't include the carryover from that previous budget year?
No, that is the
That
carryover.
is with the carryover.
That is
at
with the
end of year.
carryover.
Do we know what the carryover number is for 2023? What that number was?
It's about 2.5.
That's another question, so I'd have to go get this year's
Yeah, and
budget.
so let me just speak for everybody if I can for just a second. We don't want to put you on the spot, brother. If you need a break,
Yeah.
you gotta go, we can take breaks, we're good. This is important stuff.
So I can tell you in this year's budget, fiscal year 25, we have used $3.2 million in that prior year appropriation to fund the various programs, services that are a part of that, whether it's the sidewalk, street resurfacing, some
We've
of
done that
our.
via budget resolution
Yes, sir.
already.
Some of our capital projects for parks, streets, et cetera, that was already
Hold those thoughts, hold those thoughts for just one
Yep.
second. I gotta back you up for just a second. Walk me back through this a second. So the auditors reported 24.2 million as of September 30th of 23,
That's correct.
which puts us at 39%.
Just under, yes, sir.
Okay. That's the same date. I guess in my brain.
That's the end of the fiscal year last
Right.
year.
Usually
That's
the carryover. So are they backing up the carryover calculations? Because normally that happens after the end of the year.
Right,
Because we're still closing things out.
They audit it and then, but they go back to that date with the number. We
Okay,
don't
so
know
they-
that number
they
until
back
several
that
months
up.
later, correct?
They back that up and zero line that out. Okay, that's what I wanted to know. And so that's at about 39%.
I got on that.
What number are you using to project the carryover for this fiscal year we're in now?
We have quite a few expenditures that don't hit until the end of September, debt service, et cetera. So at this point in time, I'm not projecting any carry forward.
Okay. So we're expecting 0.
But
That's correct.
some of it is in the past, remember, we were allocating salary savings
Yeah.
to do projects.
Yeah.
And we're down, like I said, down to 10 vacancies. Police is full through training. And I think some of you, I told that story, we had a payroll of over 500 people for the first time ever of our 500 employees. So benefit of the department heads, the good chiefs that have kept their departments full, and the HR people now that are here, but we don't have the benefit of not having salary savings is we got good employees, but we don't have as much extra money.
So we've removed all salary savings projections from this budget. There's
There
none
is
in
no salary savings in next year's proposed budget.
Okay.
Okay. And John, one more question in regards to that. You said we're 24.2 million, approximately 39%, minus the 3 million or so that you said we appropriated
The-
this year. So that drops that 39% probably closer to the 35, 36
That's correct.
range,
And
or a
I'd
little
be,
less.
with everything that we've done the last few years, and your auditor made sure to point this out, in 2021, we were at 59.5% of reserves, 22, 46.8% of reserves, and we were 40.8
Before.
based on last year's budget numbers,
Okay.
so we're at 39% based on next year's
So we, I
budget
mean,
numbers,
we-
so it's
we've
going down.
utilized the significant
Somewhat.
amount of that
Yep.
to,
Well, I think what you're alluding to is, and typically speaking, when we have a budget overage at the end of the year,
Yeah.
because we've managed our money properly,
Oh, yeah.
that money will sit there, and then we go into a budget cycle and decide how to spend it next year.
Yeah.
So you got an overage last year, and we're figuring out how to spend it next year. We had issues we needed taken care of now because of hurricanes, because of
And-
roads not being
yeah.
taken care of, sidewalks not being taken care of. We took a lot of that money and spent it this year because the need exists now. So
Absolutely.
what we've normally done, when you see money that's left over from last year, you can allocate towards next year. Some of it's there, but a lot of it was already spent by this council through budget resolution to go take care of those needs right now because our people were ready to do it, and they did it.
well, I just want to make sure we don't keep ratcheting that down as we go along, because
Oh, absolutely.
you're knocking down those numbers slowly but surely, and then all of a sudden, we're going to wake up one day and we're under 30%, and we're going to be like, whoa, you know.
Yeah, he won't support transferring the money if it's going to put us below the
Yeah,
the
and
requirement.
that's what I mean. We don't want to get there, so we got to maintain a comfortable thing, because we
I
don't
am
know what
absolutely
happens with
for
hurricanes.
maintaining a 30 to 35% reserve because
Okay.
what we had after major hurricanes 2 years ago was weeks of recovery.
Yeah.
And I go to Florida League of Cities talking to cities that had to borrow money that went months into recovery.
And I think we're still in that recovery from a couple
And
years ago.
so I think what I heard you guys asking, just to make sure we're answering your questions correctly, is that so we do have reserves even with those expenditures above what you've considered safe, the 30% or so range. So there's an amount of money that we expect to have in reserves that could be used without putting you in trouble. What we have different now than in the past is we have executed way better on the budget you gave us. So I've worked in places where if you showed up and spent 85% of your budget, you get yelled at. Why did we budget for that? Why did we tax people for that if you can't, if you have it, you should be doing something for your people with it. And we were not executing the capital under the prior group. We are now executing the capital. In fact, the reason for the sidewalks is we told these guys to execute, and they spent everything we had in sidewalk repairs in the first 6 months of the year. Putting people like this in charge of your construction projects got your construction projects done. So what they're looking at is, okay, we're spending everything we've got. The employees are here, so we don't have, that's where your money left over at the end of the year is unfinished construction
Yeah.
and vacancies and staff, and we're not gonna transfer as much over this year. We're gonna execute your budget a lot better, which from a public standpoint is a good thing.
Yeah.
What we have taken in as revenue, we have spent on services back for them instead of sitting on it and putting it away. But we still maintain revenues or reserves at a level that's safe for us if we get a double hurricane again. And to the point where there may be, as you guys talk, a possibility for you to take some of that money and maybe do one of the projects with it or something. Is that correct, John?
Yes, sir. Our policy is a 30 to 35% fund balance. So that means based on next year's budget, our fund balance is supposed to be 18.4 to 21.4 million dollars. This year alone, we've had two major items that have come up that we've utilized this fund balance of the 24 million. City Center. Parks, the whole. PD, HVAC, and additional money for streets and sidewalks. So to truly tell you where we are from that 24.2 to make sure that we're within that target, I would need some time to go through and look at the full
And that's
budget
fine,
amendments.
and that's the challenge that I want to give to staff tonight. I think that's where Scott's going with it when his initial comments is, we've got dollars out there that we can use for things now. And instead of sitting and waiting and then they become available and we know what they are next year, we want to be able to get things done now. You're talking about spending more on sidewalks, spending more on paving, and that's a source of funding that's available to us now. And if we don't have to increase the millage rate as much, whatever that might be, and even if there's some more things that need to be done, I'm all for it. Whatever makes a difference in this community with infrastructure, bring it to us. Let's do it. Let's talk about it. But what I would like is council has set a max millage tonight that makes sense, knowing that we have this ability and likely we have similar conversations every year. And Wayne and his staff always go back every year and sharpen their pencils a little bit. This might be a big difference, this might be a little difference, but whatever it is, it would be nice if we can see what that is and push the needle a little bit and actually get more things done.
All right, so John, do you know what the carryover was for last year, what that amount was?
I have it here, but I would have to go and look at the detail of everything that it was.
Okay.
So I need probably
I'd
about
like
20
to-
minutes.
And I apologize, because I probably should have given you more heads up on that. I thought it was maybe a little bit easier to identify that.
Yep.
for
I
like
can
the
tell
last
you
couple
what
years.
we've used.
So let me just, so here's why I'm asking this.
It was
So when I
roughly
got
a
on-
couple $1 million.
When I
and
got on
we've used
city
some of it.
council in 2014, we had a large history of extremely high reserve funds.
Correct.
Every year, the auditor stands before us and gives us that number, the GFOA recommendation of about 16.8. Is that right? About 16.8, 16.6.
16.7.
That's what the GFOA recommends. We as a council enacted a working policy to say, hey, listen, we don't need reserve funds up in the 50 percentiles, because many times we were way over 50. So in 2014, we enacted this working policy and said, you know what, we're a coastal community. How do we feel about, we'll just double the GFOA recommendation. So about 32%-ish was the concept and the idea. But it seemed like, and by the way, I applaud the department heads and the city staff. I truly do, to be able to put together a working budget every year and come in under the budget. That's fabulous. That helps us get more done for the city. Every year is a little different, right? The economy's different, inflation's different. Whatever all those variables are, there's differences every year, and that's our job as the elected body to say, hey, this is one of those years we can get more done. This is one of those years we tighten the belt, so forth and so on. So the reason I'm asking you these questions, and I hope you know truly that I'm not trying to put you on the spot, is in my mind, I'm trying to better understand where were we last year? Where are we in our current year budget? Are we in trouble? Are the department heads doing a good job? Are we, I know it's a safe thing for you to say that you don't anticipate any carryover, but the history for the last 10 years has been that there will be carryover funds. There will be some, and I get that helps us get capital projects done. The only exception to that is if something has gone wrong, and I haven't seen anything in your quarterly budget briefings to show that, hey, we're in trouble. Revenues didn't come in and expenses are super high over here, and we're gonna fall short this year. We're gonna have to save ourselves out of reserve. So I'm not hearing that. I don't see that. So that's why I'm trying to get some of these numbers and get some ideas. And I get that we don't have all the information. Like it's a huge thing. I know I just feel like it was deja vu. We were up here talking about the intergovernmental funds. You know, here we are in a municipal government trying to make responsible decisions. We don't even know what those state numbers are yet. We're projecting flat.
So I can tell you the two that we've gotten, one was high, one was low, there was zero.
There you go, right?
So, I mean, you know, so, and I'm not trying to be, you know,
But one of your projections was lower.
no, we got the
From
state
revenue
revenue
last
in, one was high, one was low. They netted to
From last year.
zero, so it was a net increase.
Right.
So, and I'm not trying to, you know, be standoffish on this, because I was very clear when I said unassigned, assigned fund balance. We have restricted and committed fund balance, you know, so, you know, again, I'm reading
Sure.
right off of what the auditor presented.
We're talking about
It's 36, and like I said, I can tell you right now that since we adopted the budget last year, y'all have approved budget amendments of just under $9 million in prior year appropriations for various things that were carryovers, et cetera. So that's why to make sure that I'm answering your question properly between what was restricted, committed, assigned, is I tell you exactly
we're
what's
worried about the
remaining on the
unencumbered numbers.
So
unassigned.
I think this speaks to the importance of what Scott already said about having last year's numbers side by side in the presentation, which this is actually still my favorite PowerPoint that's been presented in my time on council, as far as having a lot of great detail. But so I shouldn't have, or not that I shouldn't have to ask a question, but it would be easier if I could look next to intergovernmental revenue here on this slide on page 11 and see what that number was last year, because I'm understanding now that number is flat from last year. Is there any chance that all that number goes down?
I've only seen that occur one time in my career, and that
Okay.
was in 2020 after COVID hit,
Okay.
due to the municipal sales tax revenue that's shared by the state when that plummeted. That's the only time. It typically goes up with CPI, you know, so, you know, I've always been asked to keep it flat when I'm standing before you during this meeting, and then bringing what the true number might come in mid-August when I come into the first public
And I have
hearing.
no issue with that, because the last thing that I want to do from my seat is to sit here and set a max millage that puts us in a bad position to where we don't have the revenue and then we have to make cuts to things we don't want to make cuts to. So I have no issue with that approach. It's important to know what we did last year and this year, what we're looking at side by side for sure.
And some of the intergovernmental revenue last year in the general fund was also, you know, prior year hurricane money. So, you know, because that's intergovernmental. So,
Yeah.
you know, we had, you know, these last 2 years due to Hurricane Ian and Nicole, I mean, that just creates, you know, an extra level of fun when doing a, you know, comparison of budgets.
By the way, first of all, don't mention the H word. 'Cause we don't want to hear the H word and jinx this. But keep in mind, what we're talking about now and setting a max millage rate is based on the information we have. We will accumulate a lot more information in August, and our first reading of the budget is September 4th.
On the note of information, if I may,
Mhm.
I know 70% of our homes are homesteaded. Another slide that I would like to see is a breakdown of residential income revenue from properties that are homesteaded versus ones that aren't, versus commercial. I think that's important to have that breakdown as to how much of our revenues that come in, actual dollars, not percentages, not, you know, parcels, but actual dollars. I'd like to have that information. I'd also be very curious just to know how many parcels paid no tax, because I know that Wayne has brought up, we have a few of those in the city, and I don't know what that number is. I know I've seen it once before in a presentation. I'd like to see that again as well.
Well, there are various reasons for that, though.
I understand. I'd still
That
like
is
to see
not
the number.
something that I get standard. I would have to request that from the property appraiser directly, which isn't an issue.
You'd probably be getting last year's numbers, not this year's projections, because I don't think they'd have those numbers.
That's correct. They don't have everything finalized yet.
Well, and if that's not
But
applicable.
all the same.
But that'll give us,
Yeah.
those numbers will give us a general
Yeah.
idea.
Yeah,
If you
we'll get it-
remember, I
this
got
is a
something
guideline.
very similar to that last
Yeah.
year.
All right, so help us go back and do some basic math here for a second. Can you go back to the part of the presentation that shows us, or Wayne, maybe if it's you that wants to do it, that shows us our one-time capital expenditures that we're trying to produce out of this proposed budget?
The next slide.
I think you said it was around a little over 5 million.
5.3 million. My estimate out of that, by just going down through the list that was in the PowerPoint, about 5.3 million are general fund. And the top, and the outlay is about 3 million.
Okay, and those are one-time
Correct.
deals, non-recurring revenue. Okay, so,
God, I hope Cambridge Canal is one time.
all right, 5.3 million. And John, if I know this is probably putting you on the spot with those numbers, but like if we want to take another, let's say 650,000 out of current reserve funds, does that put us in any jeopardy of not being in our policy? I mean,
That's where I would need to go, and again, we've used the 9 million to
Yeah.
see which pocket it came out of.
if we took $1 million out, where would we be? You know, I mean, those are some numbers.
To go
but-
right off the cuff, the answer is no.
Okay.
Because that would take us at 36.49 million, just down to 37. So I'm well within the range that I gave you of 18.4 to 21.4.
Okay, so 18.4 in reserves puts us at what percent?
30.
30%, you said?
Oh yeah, 30. I already did that math. I'm just getting ready to do it again. Yeah, it's 30%. I already
Okay.
did that.
All right, okay. And so, help us.
Yeah.
So I think we see the intent.
I think if you can say,
Of council.
how low do you want what level of reserve are you comfortable with?
Right.
I'll get him to go back and calculate what the difference is between what we expect to have and where you're comfortable, and that'll be the amount of money we can say, we can pull that and pay for some of these projects with it. And then that you can take from millage if you would prefer.
Well, I would
I
not.
mean, so my thought, council, this is just for us, is look, the residents are getting hammered with home insurance rate increases. Inflation sucks. Sometimes we've got to look at things that maybe we wouldn't ordinarily do without getting ourselves in trouble. I think we may be in a position where we can do that this year with these one-time expenditures. The GFOA and the auditors recommend 16.8. I'm not advocating to go anywhere close to that. By the way, that's what Orman stays at as a practice, just so you know. That is their, and many times I think they've actually been under that, but that's their practice. So
We're not on.
I'm not advocating us to do that. I certainly am not advocating that. But we have a working policy. It is a flexible policy. It is our policy. We know what the GFOA recommendation is that keeps us in a good decision-making process. And so all I'm asking for here is an idea from staff. Give us some ideas that are somewhat flexible, comfortable, might be out of the norm because of the current economic situation that our residents are in this year. We think that there's a very strong likelihood that if federal politics change in the recent months to come, that things change. We know that. We see that. I mean, presidential races have economic impacts on all of us, including the municipality. So we don't know what those are going to be. But for right now, in this moment in time, I want to have these discussions with our one-time expenditures because that's an appropriate thing to do. That's what that money is there for, to give us those kind of flexibilities, especially with our one-time purchases. The mayor said it perfectly. These aren't even discussions to have with reoccurring costs.
Absolutely not.
There's where you get into real trouble, and that's not what I'm looking to do. So
And we are definitely not looking to not do any of these things, because they're all important.
they're all important, and I can't stress enough.
We've
Wayne,
delayed
and
some of these things way too long.
I really appreciate, Wayne, that you listed in here all of the things our staff has done to find savings. These are big number savings, and these always help. But that's what's expected, you know? So kudos to them for sure. Keep up the good work on that. Always be looking for that. I can't stress the importance of that enough. That's awesome. That allows us to do more for our residents, do more for our employees, and that's really what we want to do. But we're going to squeeze every drop out of it that we possibly ever can, so.
So as a course of action, we need to come to a consensus on the max millage tonight, knowing that we've got a lot of questions that need answered. Would we be able to at least have the information for us by the August 6th council meeting? A lot of these things are just reference points.
You can have the
And-
information. Are you going to be capable of functioning here on your ankle?
So if you're asking to postpone this meeting until.
No, you're going to
That's
set the
not
max
what
millage.
I said at all.
Oh, just making sure, because it's due August 4th.
No, if you, whatever they set tonight, we come
absolutely.
back.
We'll
and-
set a max millage rate tonight,
Yeah.
but what I'm talking about is, we're looking for opportunities to improve on that and get things done. So we've asked questions. Obviously, we don't have all that information. Maybe we can share that as part of the city manager comments at the August 6th meeting. And then we have our workshop at the end of August.
I think we can get you the information well before the 6th if you'd like to talk about it. So the only thing is John's having a little doctor thing, and I just wanted to make sure he would be here to help answer questions on August 6th. I think
I can be here August 6th.
Okay. And
so if you'd rather do that instead
I
of
don't
waiting.
want to wait for the information, but I do want to have an opportunity to talk about it, just to make sure that we've all processed it.
The August 6th agenda is relatively light. There's some second reading items, and you have the one-time, the temporary use down at Riverwalk for the food truck court is probably the only discussion item. There's consent items, and then there's second readings and that. So it's not an overly heavy item. If you'd like us to do it on the 6th, if you'd rather us wait till the workshop, we can do that too. Whatever.
No, I just want to make sure we have the information by the 6th, so that if we have any questions about that information, we can run through them real quick on the 6th, but then we'll have that to be able to process, because we also know that no matter what you give us information-wise, staff's still got a lot of work to do before the next workshop at the end of the month.
We can get you that ahead of time. We'll put an item on the agenda just called budget discussion and let you tell us direction from there.
Very good. Any other comments or questions on the topic of budget right now before we move on to the next item?
Well, Mayor, we're trying to give him things to do and everything, and we never really were clear, are we staying in our 30 to 35% parameter for the reserves? Because I'd like to be at the upper end of that, not the low end.
I think that's
Yeah,
where we've got to have the answers.
Okay,
so-
but my intention is to be on the upper end.
I as
close
well,
to
but we've
35.
got to know what those numbers are before we can.
Because the old saving for a rainy day, our rainy days are coming, and we can't predict if we're gonna have a hurricane or not. I mean, we are.
For me personally, for whatever it's worth, I share with Drew. I want to be no lower than 33%. Like that. That's a third of the budget, and that's a pretty hard line with me as far as being willing. And again, we all unanimously
Yeah,
seem to
I-
understand one-time
35.
expenses here.
Yeah, I get that.
But
So can we do that work tonight? I mean, are we not able to get some of those answers and work tonight?
They just left because I gave them exactly what you asked, so they're
Okay.
working on it as we speak.
Okay, so as a goal, let's see what we can do at the 33% unencumbered mark.
Yep.
Okay?
35.
And let's bring that information back to us on August 6th or before, so that we can discuss on August 6th.
So we can't get that tonight, is what you're saying?
That's what we're saying.
Okay.
Yeah, I need to make sure that
Yeah,
when I
that's
tell you a
fine.
number, that I didn't put something in the wrong pot, because then that will sway the
Yeah.
percentage.
Yeah, I want to see the 35 number,
Yeah.
not 33. But,
Okay. And we can discuss that.
yeah.
All right. With that, on the topic of the budget, would anyone here care to speak to the item? There being none, we will move on to item 5. Item 5 in the budget, the recommended motion is to approve the maximum operating millage rate. First reading will occur on September 4th at 5:30 p.m. Final hearing of the budget, September 18th at 5:30 p.m. With that, the recommendation of staff is at 4.9999, and I would entertain a motion at this point.
I'll motion to set the max millage rate at 4.9999.
Is there a second?
Guys, that's a max.
That's a max. Can I get a second? We don't know, it's kind of hard to say we're going to cut so much as $1 until we know it's available.
Correct. That's the problem.
yeah, and that's more my concern. Yeah, I'll second it.
We have a motion, proper second. The item is open on the floor for discussion to set the maximum millage rate at 4.9999, which is 8.38% above rollback. Comments, questions, council?
I had,
Again,
I had one more comment I was going to make when we were still doing the budget. I'll make it now because it's still, all this applies to each other. You know, Wayne's first slide here that he had on his presentation talks about not having a reduction in service, which none of us want. None of us want to reduce services.
Yeah.
But when you add 2 community service officers, when you add a division chief, an engineer manager, when you do additional sidewalk repairs, that's not keeping the same level of service. That's improving the services. And I think residents in Port Orange, I think from what I hear, from the feedback I get, they don't mind as long as they feel like they're getting something for what they're paying for, right? And so while the budget is higher this year, we've seen staff come up with great innovations, and a lot of them, self-started, right? We've seen the money that's been put to use be put to use in really wise ways and efficient ways, and then we're getting asked for additional things to provide additional services to our residents. At least for me, anytime I want to know I'm getting something for what I'm paying for. I'm not going to support a 49999 as a final millage, especially what we discussed today, because I think Scott's brought up a great point. We've already found $200,000 in the elevator, which was something I felt very strongly about. But I will support the max because I trust that staff's going to go back and they're going to find answers to this.
You
So
found $200,000 in an elevator?
I didn't find it. No, actually, Tom and Robin found it. I just suggested we don't fix both of them, and they found a way to fix both of them for half the cost. So
There you go. That's why we keep asking questions.
Absolutely.
Tracy, what you got?
I have to agree with council and what Councilman Foley just said. I mean, we set the max as the max, and we hope that everybody will come back. Numbers come in from the state that are better than being flat, and that we can drive this down.
We usually have and usually will. We have done that in the past, and I think that we were all agreed on that. Absolutely. We're just starting. Scott?
No, I don't have anything else.
Drew?
No, I'm good.
Okay. Anyone from the public on setting the max millage rate at 4.9999? Anyone like to speak? And back to us. Final comments. Council. There being none, call the roll.
Councilman Foley,
yes.
Councilman Grubbs,
Yes.
Councilman Bastian,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Stiltner,
No.
Mayor Burnett.
No. Pass 3-2. Just want to remind everybody, we are going to have another workshop at the end of August, but the actual budget hearings will occur on September 4th. That is a Wednesday, and September 18th, also a Wednesday, both of those times at 5:30 here in City Council chambers. Wayne, any other business?
Yeah, and you get the PowerPoint back on screen.
I thought he wanted the dates up.
And this, just to make sure that I'm posting for the trim notice also the GO bond millage rate of the 0.1720.
And then can you move it all the way forward to the last slide that shows the dates?
Yes, sir.
We need a motion on the go bond.
Yes, please.
Okay. Can
I
see
motion.
that? Can I see that number?
0.1720.
Is that the motion you're about to make, Drew?
Yeah, I'll motion to keep it at our current rate.
At the proposed rate of
Yes,
0.17.
yes.
I'll second.
We have a motion proper second on the go bond. Council comments? Would anyone here care to speak to the item? None. Back to us. Final comments? Call the roll.
Councilman Foley,
Yes.
Councilman Grubbs,
Yes.
Councilman Bastian.
Yes.
Vice Mayor Stiltner.
Yes.
Mayor Burnett.
Yes, 5-0. Upcoming meetings, CRA budgets will be incorporated into the council meeting on Tuesday, August 6th at 6:30. As mentioned before, the public hearings, September 4th and September 18th, here at 5:30. We'll start an hour earlier than we normally do for council meetings on both of those. And like I said, those are standalone meetings, and they will be held here on Wednesdays. Any other business come before us this evening? Not? All right. We'll see you all next week.